Hello everyone, Interact back here again with another episode of Entity Education Extra Credit. In this episode, we're going to be covering the rework of the nurse, so this one will probably be a lot shorter than the other episodes since only her power and add-ons got a rework. I will still quickly cover her teachable perks, tips for playing her, and a few builds and meme builds, but hopefully this will actually be shorter. I'm trying to trim down the time on these videos. As always, there will be timestamps up on the screen right now, and also down in the description of the video if you want to skip to certain sections. Before we get started though, I do want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor for this video, water. My wife and some of my friends are healthcare professionals, and they have all told me that water is actually extremely important for staying alive. Thanks water, and remember everyone, stay hydrated. Bad jokes aside though, let's get started with the nurse's base stats. They haven't changed, so she's still the nice slow 3.85 meters per second or 96.25% speed while moving around, which is slower than a survivor running in a straight line. She still has a tear radius of 32 meters and all other basic stats, vault speed, break speed, whatever. So let's jump into talking about the changes that they made to her base kit. Instead of the old version where you could just blink twice, fatigue, and then blink all over again, they put her blink on a recharge system. So now, after you blink, you still have to wait out your fatigue, but then you have to wait 3 seconds to be able to blink again, and an extra 3 seconds for each chain blink. Your recharge timer does begin as soon as your fatigue time begins, and will not recharge if you're holding on to a blink and charging it up, so keep that in mind. This means that her first recharged blink will happen fairly quickly after you've finished fatigue. Pretty much all of her other mechanics are still the same as they were though, meaning that a maximum charged first blink will take you 20 meters, take 2 seconds to fully charge up, and have a fatigue time of 2 seconds. You will have a window of 1.5 seconds after a blink to chain another one, also called the chain blink window, unsurprisingly. And each chain blink will take you up to half of your maximum blink distance, and add an additional 0.5 seconds of fatigue on top of your base amount. If you attack and miss after a blink, it will also add an additional 1 second of fatigue. All in all, the change really just boils down to slight tweaks to her base kit. Basically, you can no longer just chain blinks together forever just to traverse the map or catch up to survivors as easily. There's just a bit of lag time before you're actually able to chain your blinks all together. Do keep in mind, as I said, if you start charging a blink before your second or third chain blinks have finished fully recovering, the recovery time will be completely paused and you will have to wait to charge it all over again once you're finished blinking. Her old mechanic of being able to be light burned remains unchanged, as far as I can tell. If you are having a flashlight shined at you, you'll be unable to charge up a blink at all. If you get blinded while you're charging a blink, you'll get stunned in addition to being blinded. This basically never happens, but just be aware that if someone is shining a flashlight at you and you're furiously trying to blink at them and it's not working, that's why. Now let's talk about her reworked add-ons. We start off at the common tier with Wooden Horse. Wooden Horse will reduce the extra fatigue you get from missing your blink attacks by 50% or 0.5 seconds. It's a pretty nice common add-on if you miss your blink attacks a lot like I do. Next up we have White Knit Comb. White Knit Comb will now moderately decrease the length of your blink lunge attacks. This means that it will decrease it by 50% or 0.15 seconds and give you an extra 100% blood points for blink attack score events. More BP meme add-ons, huh behavior? Alright, sure. Following that we have Plaid Flannel. They actually did it the absolute madmen. They made it a common add-on instead of a very rare add-on like it should have been originally. It's still the same add-on, just shows you where your blink goes. And finally we have Metal Spoon. Metal Spoon will now cause your blink attacks to make survivors have their screams of pain moderately louder for 60 seconds. This means that their injured sounds will be increased by 100% for 60 seconds. This is basically just her teachable perk Strider in add-on form, which is kind of weird, but alright. Let's move on to her uncommon add-ons now. We start off with Pocket Watch. Pocket Watch will now moderately increase the duration of your chain blink window. This means an increase of 13% or 0.2 seconds. This add-on's worthless, I'm sorry. Next up we have Dull Bracelet. Dull Bracelet will decrease your maximum blink distance by 20% or 4 meters and give you 100% more blood points for the precise blink score event. Is this correct? They added not just one, but 2 fucking meme BP add-ons for the nurse? Behavior, are you guys serious about this?
Yes,
This is a typo, right?
No, it's not.
It's not a typo?
No, it is not.
Okay, I'm being told it's not a typo. They actually just gave her 2 meme add-ons, so let's just move on now. Moving on, we get to Dark Cincture. It will moderately decrease your blink charge time, which means it will decrease it by 13% or 0.4 seconds. This seems pretty alright, but it might mess with your muscle memory, so be a bit careful. Next up, we have Catatonic Boy's Treasure, which is still awkwardly named. Catatonic Boy's Treasure will considerably reduce your fatigue from extra chain blinks by 100% or 0.5 seconds. This would be sweet if you could actually have more than just like 2 chain blinks, but reducing your fatigue time at all is still pretty good. And the final uncommon add-on for Nurse is Bad Man Keepsake. Bad Man Keepsake will make it so that after hitting a survivor with a blink attack, they will have their aura revealed to you for 60 seconds if they are healing within 28 meters of you. Behavior, seriously? You gave the character with the Teachable for this effect an add-on that has the same effect not just once, but twice? Is everything at Behavior HQ alright? Is this a cry for help? Back to add-ons now. Let's talk about her rare add-ons. We start off with Spasmodic Breath. Spasmodic Breath will make it so that hitting a survivor with a blink attack will disable your ability to blink, and will also increase your base movement speed to 4.6 meters per second, or 115% for 60 seconds. This is kind of what I'm talking about for cool add-ons. It's a cool concept, turning yourself into an M1 killer after landing a blink hit. I don't think it's very good, but it does have some meme potential. Next up, we have Heavy Panting, which is still such a poorly chosen name, but whatever. It will considerably increase the maximum range of your blinks, meaning 20% or 4 meters, at the cost of considerably increasing the charge time of your blinks, which is also 20% or 0.4 seconds. Basically, you're trading off charge time for extra range. This is what range add-ons probably should have been all along. Following that, we have Fragile Wheeze. Fragile Wheeze will considerably decrease your blink recharge time. This means 20% reduction or 0.6 seconds off of your recharge time, making you able to blink a bit sooner after using another blink. Then we have Ataxic Respiration. Ataxic Respiration will moderately reduce your base blink fatigue time, which is so hard to say. This means a reduction of 12.5% or 0.25 seconds, which is basically nothing. And finally, we have Anxious Gasp. Anxious Gasp will make it so that blinking past a survivor will cause them to scream and award you an extra 200 extra blood. Are you kidding me? Another me. What? Does anyone know what the Canadian 911 is? Can we send some help to the people at Behavior? I think something has gone horribly wrong. In all seriousness though, this add-on isn't actually all that bad, since it does make them scream and you may have missed them while you were blinking past them, and there's no downsides. So given how good her base kit is, you probably aren't going to regret running something like this, most likely, and like, maybe it'll give you some extra information. I don't know. Now let's move on to the Nurse's very rare add-ons. If there's a meme BP add-on, I swear to God I am done making these videos. We start off with Kavanaugh's Last Breath. Kavanaugh's Last Breath will tremendously increase your maximum blink range by 30% or 6 meters at the cost of tremendously increasing the charge time, meaning 30% or 0.6 seconds. Once again, I'm not really sure if this is good or not, but it's what range add-on should have been to begin with. Following that, we have Jenner's Last Breath. Jenner's Last Breath will make it so that after you blink, you can press your secondary action button, which is left control on PC, to blink back to your original position. This effect requires a blink charge and can only be done during the blink window. Honestly, this is my jam right here. This is what I've wanted. This is sweet design, even if it is kind of maybe a meme. It's a good direction for Behavior to take very rare add-ons in the future. This is the kind of cool design space and out-of-the-box thinking I have been begging for behavior to do with add-ons for what feels like forever now. Please, more add-ons like this and less meme BP add-ons behavior. Please. Then we have Campbell's Last Breath. Campbell's Last Breath will make it so that after reappearing from a fully charged blink, you will blink at a half blink in the direction that you're currently facing. In essence, this is kind of a weird forced range add-on, but kind of removes your ability to control how far you go if you're fully charging blinks. It's interesting, I'm just not sure if it's good. And the last very rare add-on is Bad Man's Last Breath. Bad Man's Last Breath will make it so that hitting a survivor with a blink attack will grant the nurse the undetectable status effect for 16 seconds, removing her terror radius and red stain. This has a cooldown of 60 seconds, so you can't just be sneaking around forever if you're really good at landing blink hits. Now let's move on to talking about the nurse's ultra rare add-ons, because yes, she has some now. We start off with Torn Bookmark. Torn Bookmark will add 1 blink charge, but you can no longer blink to locations that are not in your line of sight. You can still blink through windows and pallets because you can see over them, so don't worry about being blocked by them. This is another cool design and something really unique, and I like it, but since the nurse has her strengths kind of from ignoring walls and loops and stuff, I'm not really sure if this is what you want to be doing, but it's a cool design nonetheless. And the nurse's final add-on and final ultra rare add-on is Matchbox. Matchbox will remove 1 blink charge, giving you just a single blink, and increase your base movement speed to 4.2 meters per second, or 105%, which is what Michael Myers moves in Tier 1. I don't really know what to say about this add-on. I think it's cool that it changes her kit in kind of a neat way, so it feels like an ultra rare, but I don't know that it's any good. Let's briefly cover the nurse's Teachable perks, since it's been, let me check really, Jesus. A very long time since I've covered them in a video. I'll just briefly cover what they do and not really talk about how much I think they're useful or worthless or not. At level 30, you'll unlock the Teachable for the perk Strider. Strider will make the breathing of injured survivors 25/25/50% louder, and the breathing of healthy survivors 0/0/25% louder. I'm laughing because old perk designs were so weird and they still haven't changed this one. At level 35, you'll unlock the Teachable for the perk Thanatophobia, which I probably mispronounced again. This perk will give each survivor a 3/3.5/4% slowdown to their action speeds for repairing, healing, or sabotaging for each survivor that is injured, hooked, or dying. And finally, at level 40, you'll unlock the Teachable for a Nurse's Calling. A Nurse's Calling will show the auras of all healing survivors within 20/24/28 meters of you. Do note that this will only show survivors who are healing normally. It will not show survivors who are on the ground recovering, even if they have Unbreakable, or if they're being healed by things like Adrenaline, Inner Strength, Second Wind, whatever. Also note that mending and snapping out of it are not considered healing actions and therefore will not be shown with Nurse's Calling. Normally I'd have a pretty lengthy section on how to play the killer that I'm covering in detail, but I'm gonna be straight up and honest. I'm a pretty average nurse player. I don't really think I'm the best person to be looking to for advice. That said, I'll give you the tips that I can. Honestly, the first tip is going to sound like kind of a cop-out, but it's basically just practice the nurse as much as you can if you really want to play her. You'll need to put in a fair amount of work to get a feel for how far you'll blink if you've charged a certain amount of time, how much you should charge to go this distance or that distance or whatever, and when you should be swinging at survivors after blinks or when it's best to not swing, so you don't get that extra fatigue time. All of this just takes time and practice. As I said, I know it sounds kind of like a cop-out, just practice, forehead, but honestly, it's probably the best advice I can give. The second piece of advice is to just get used to watching survivors during the match, and then adapting your playstyle to counter theirs. What do I mean by this, you may wonder? Let's say, for example, you notice a survivor is doubling back on themselves a lot to try to counter your blinking when they see that you've charged it up a lot. This is a pretty common tactic. Once you've noticed that a survivor has been doing this, you can adapt your blinks and start going shorter with them to try and catch them off guard and land easier hits. If you notice that they're using another common tactic, which is breaking line of sight by rounding a corner, and then maybe being stealthier either by doubling back when they hear you blink, or by slow vaulting windows or hiding in lockers or something, you may want to start blinking at the corners instead of trying to follow through on where they would be running to land a hit on them when they're trying to be stealthy. And the final piece of advice I can give is another thing that's kind of less concrete and more of a conceptual thing. But you'll want to get a feel for how survivors move around basically every tile, and how far they can go when they're running in a straight line while you're charging up your blink. If you get this down really well, you'll be able to basically predict where survivors are going to be while they're on loops or structures or around corners or whatever, and you'll be able to blink on top of them even if you can't see them. Once again, this just requires a lot of time, practice, patience, and map knowledge. It can seem a bit daunting, but if you just keep playing the nurse and stick to it, you'll get the hang of it pretty quickly. Thankfully, they did make plaid flannel a common add-on now, so you can get a feel for how blink works a lot easier. If you're new to nurse, my advice would be to play a few matches, say 2 or 3, with plaid flannel equipped, and then try playing a few matches without it. You don't want to become reliant on plaid flannel, so you're hooked on it and you have to run it every single match. So I think you should do, a few on, a few off, and this might help you learn a bit faster and get more confident on knowing where your blinks will land, based on how long you've charged them, and you may be able to start cutting off survivors or blinking on top of them a little bit easier. So let's briefly talk about perks to consider running while playing the nurse. Since the nurse's power is really good, the typical build for a more confident nurse player is Barbecue and Chili, Shadowborn, a Nurse's Calling, and Whispers. Barbecue gives you an idea of where to blink towards after you get a hook to keep your pressure up. A Nurse's Calling gives you wall hacks on people who are trying to heal, which can be great because you can just blink on top of them and down them. And Whispers is just a generalized tracking perk for letting you know if you're in the right area to find survivors, and can be used to pinpoint survivors if you're extremely good at using Whispers. The kind of odd perk out here is Shadowborn. Shadowborn helps the nurse in 2 ways. The most obvious being just boosting your FOV so you can see more survivors and spot them easier out of your peripheral vision because it's increased. The second way that Shadowborn helps the nurse specifically is that boosting your FOV and fatigue is really good, so you won't lose survivors as easy when you're spending all your time throwing up all over her. Does she even wear shoes? I don't think she wears shoes. When you're throwing up after you've ripped through the space-time continuum. You'll notice that there aren't really any slowdown perks in this build, and that's because nurse is really good, and you shouldn't really need them if you're confident. If you aren't feeling extremely confident in your ability to play nurse to her full potential, you could consider subbing in a perk like Sloppy Butcher or Pop Goes the Weasel to slow down the match instead. So now I would be remiss if I didn't give some quick meme builds, because honestly, I think they're maybe the best part of the video, and the one that I have the most fun with. The first meme build for the nurse, and one that I love running, is just honestly silly. It's just fun. We're gonna call it like Metal Gear Nurse, I guess. You can want whatever perks you feel like running. Yeah, I mean, you're playing nurse after all. And then you're going to want to run the add-ons Spasmodic Breath and Bad Man's Last Breath. This way, once you've blinked, and hit somebody, you'll become a sneaky 115% killer for 16 seconds. The survivors will be expecting you to blink after them again, and instead you can just sneak up on them quickly and down them with a basic hit. This does kind of lose its surprise factor after the first few times that you've actually pulled it on survivors, but I think it's hilarious and a fun little meme build. And the other meme build is one that people keep wanting me to play, but I can't seem to get my head around it. It's like Tracer Nurse. You run whatever perks you want to run, and then the add-ons Jenner's Last Breath for the blinking back and forth thing. And then honestly, whatever other add-on you want. I think the most fun would probably be Anxious Gasp. Well, how did I say that wrong? For the screaming, because, it's cool, I guess. You can get some decent mind games from blinking back and forth, and I'm sure if you're a better nurse player than me, you could actually make this build work, and it could be a real thing and not just a meme. Probably. Maybe. And that's it for this episode of Entity Education Extra Credit, covering Sally Smithson, probably better known as the nurse. Sorry this video took a little bit longer than I expected. I've been busy with a few things. The first major thing that I want to talk about is that I put together a spreadsheet for all of the killer's add-ons and powers and their base times and timings, numbers, percentages, whatever. I'll have a link to it in the comments and the description of the video, so check that out if you haven't seen it already. I'm trying to keep it up to date and as accurate as I possibly can using the data mine that I have. So feel free to message me if you see anything that you know is 100% a mistake. Do not message me if you only have speculation that it's a mistake. I have notes about that. Or if the wiki says something different. The wiki is not accurate most of the time. I'm sorry to tell you. I also didn't expect my killer slowdown video to be as big as it was, and I've been working on a video covering all of the killer's tracking perks, and there's like 28 of them. So that video is a serious undertaking, and the scripting of it is horrific right now. Anyways, as always, social media stuff is up on the screen right now. I appreciate everybody who watches these videos, and I'll either see you on my Twitch stream or in the next video, which will be another video. I don't know what it'll be on. Who knows? Thank you for watching once again. Goodbye.